Thank you, Becky, for inviting me to this event. I'm an academic and a practitioner who works in teams that create technologies that support health and well-being. In my lab, we have created technologies to help adolescents manage their asthma, that treat people with insomnia, that prevent depression and anxiety, help Indigenous Australians thrive when they go to university. But beyond these specific interventions, and as someone who combines design and engineering and who teaches others how to do the same, I'm especially concerned about understanding the impact that all technologies have on human lives and society. On the one hand, since our greatest existential risk is climate change, I believe this needs to be sustainable. But more importantly for this community, I also believe that all technologies should support mental health and psychological well-being. I have argued that this is a matter of professional ethics. So before I talk about mental health, I would like to talk about what is ethical engineering. Now, the answer to this question has changed over time, and as you might imagine, it has been influenced by changing values. For example, in the 18th and 19th century, engineers drove the first industrial revolution. This included exciting new materials, brand new forms of energy, and new technologies that increased productivity. These were the factories, the steam engines, the trains rushing industry and people's lives into new frontiers. England was at the heart of this industrial revolution, taking the reins deep with Victorian values. At the cusp of this revolution, Prince Albert organized what was the Great Exhibition of 1851. This was a crystal palace, an engineer wonder entirely made of glass and iron that rose from the ground as if by industrial magic. Visitors came from all over the world. They included Charles Darwin, Charles Dickens, Lewis Carroll, and they experienced an industrial miracle. It was such a success that its revenues funded Albertopolis. Today, Albertopolis is known as Exhibition Road, pictured here in modern-day London. The vision for Albertopolis was to celebrate and drive the advancement of industry in the UK. Today, it is the home of Imperial College London, the Royal College of Arts, the Victoria and Albert Museum, all world-leading institutions in design and engineering. But there's more to this story. If you take a closer look, we find there are also impacts on human and society that aren't quite so worthy of celebration. There are children working in these factories. Workers are exploited, living in crowded and unsanitary conditions, and disease is rampant. The air fills with smoke and the water with waste. In London in 1858, we see Death himself rowing through a toxic river Thames. What values were driving a technological progress that could overlook such massive costs? And could things have been done differently? Well, during the first industrial revolution, our values were centered on improving the economy, expanding commerce, and building empire. This meant productivity and speed were the heroes of the day. Engineers were expected to target this. The steam engines, electricity, trains, planes, and cars that we created require that we take natural resources from the land, including water and air, and use them to feed into the economy. In addition to this consumption of resources, our products also produce waste when we make them, use them, and dispose of them. Although the impacts on humans and the environment were already evident in the 19th century, it took decades before changes were made. One way to address this is to minimize the flow of resources from and to the natural environment. This is what we call the circular economy. Waste gets fed back into industry. Now, this is a change in thinking from a framework in which rely on infinite depletion and pollution of what actually finite resources to a new framework where the ideal innovation creates no waste it can reuse. This reflects in changed in values. This is what we need today. Today, environmental impact assessments and sustainable engineering practices have changed every industry. In fact, environmental sustainability is a requirement for every industry. But as we improve technologies so they support our natural environment, what else has happened that has a huge impact on our mental health and well-being? Well, big data, small data. The data about our lives and behaviors is so lucrative that is now often called the new oil. This makes companies like Facebook and Google and Amazon the new oil companies. And this is a significant change in the way we envision society, technology, and the economy. For many of today's technologies, satisfying a human need is not the end goal, but only a means to an end. Facebook doesn't provide free social networking services to help the world connect. It does so to make a revenue. Meeting a human need for connectivity is only valuable insofar as it produces profit, and that profit comes from the data it generates and the attention it extracts and sells to advertisers. From a business perspective, Facebook's goal is to keep you paying for attention and sharing data. Even those tools designed for work, like email, calendar, etc., produce human impacts that can be overlooked in the race for commercial gain. And we have seen what happens when we do not consider the impact of resource depletion and discarding waste. When humans are used as a resource, the impacts can be felt by each of us every day. We deplete humans of attention to engage with others, to enjoy nature, to exercise, or do the things that in the longer term matter to them. The activities that support long-term well-being and mental health. Of course, there are differences between design and policy to support a sustainable environment and one that supports a respect for human nature, for well-being, for mental health. Environmental sustainability deals with products like factories and bridges that are slow or static once we install them. They have smaller scale impact and are localized to the place where they are built. Their impact can also generally be anticipated. There's a long history also of measuring this impact. We have over 50 years of research that show how to do it. Nature also, in this case, is the resource. It's not humans. And you can't go and ask plants, how did this make you feel, or animals. But on the other hand, measuring the impact of technology when it uses humans as a resource is very different. The technologies are intelligent. They self-learn and change very fast. They're unbounded. Something produced here in London can change the life of people, of my family back in Argentina. They require continuous monitoring. Measuring the impact is also new. We still don't have the methods, the measures that are needed to understand the impact of each technology. AI ethics studies are now all the rage. And again, the most important change is that humans are the resource. We are a means to an end, not the end in itself. Technology innovation is influenced by the social values of the time. And today we are at crossroads. Do we move forward towards a world where we fully recognize the impact of technology and demand that it follows our values? Or do we give up, submit to technological drivers, pretend that we cannot change them, and just hope that they will make the world a better place? Investors, governments, and many organizations are panting for the former, for driving change that puts the UK industry at the forefront of responsible innovation. And this includes Digital Catapult, and I'm part of their AI Ethics Committee, the Turing and the Ada Lovelace Institute, the Liberhume Center for the Future of Intelligence, and many others who are looking at how AI is having an impact on individuals and society. And as we create technologies that promise to improve people's lives, their health and well-being, engineers need to make similar ethical commitments to those of health professionals that have with their patients. So health professionals, when a doctor meets with a patient, they have to follow this biomedical ethics framework. This includes supporting well-being, making sure that they do not harm and support human autonomy and fair and just. Imagine what happens when doctors, hospitals, or others involved with your health are motivated only by profit. When you don't have an NHS, you need to be very careful about what the way the business models affect the health of nations. That is why we now have a biomedical ethics framework that all in this industry must abide to. That is why we also have strong regulatory frameworks that limit how products are designed, manufactured, and commercialized. We need similar ethical framework for technology, and for this we need a new approach to design and methods. We have found that self-determination theory is particularly useful. This is a theory of motivation that provides evidence of how basic psychological needs support motivation engagement that leads to better health and well-being. This includes autonomy, the feeling, willingness, and volition in every action we take. Includes competence, the feeling of being able and effective in the behaviors we engage on. This could be learning, could be at work, etc. And relatedness, the feeling of being part of a community, of feeling meaningfully connected to others. So here, autonomy, I will focus on this because it's in the biomedical ethics framework and it's particularly related to many of the technologies coming out today with artificial intelligence and so on. And autonomy may not be exactly what you think. It isn't the same as being in control. It is about feeling like you have the power to influence your experience. And this might be your life experience, a learning experience, a digital experience. Autonomy is about willingness. After all, we can very willingly choose not to be in charge or to leave something to others. This is an autonomous position. We often choose to do things we don't find particularly enjoyable, like cleaning the house or avoiding sugar or picking up our dog's poo. But because these things align with our goals and values, we don't mind. We still can feel autonomous. We endorse these things. So in short, autonomy is about endorsement and alignment with our goals and values. And when you ask people, it can sound a little bit like this when they talk about autonomy. I won't do that, or it won't do that, or it won't do what I want it to. I hate it when it does that. It's too restrictive, and so on. Notice how these users feel the technology is in charge and they can't influence it. The technology is a separate entity making decisions and taking actions they don't endorse. It should feel like a supporting tool or a partner in helping them fulfill a self-determined goal. Autonomy frustration arises when an experience feels controlling, manipulative, intrusive, nagging, inflexible. It feels like it is surveilling you or taking actions without consent. These are all blatant autonomy violations. Like, for example, a video that has an autoplay feature. But what about things when they go right? What characterizes the autonomy supportive digital experience? Characteristics are often perceived choice, clear rational, ability to personalize, sense of ownership, absence of pressure, etc. Here are two examples. Notification settings are quite fine-tuned controls that have increased the extent to which our mobile phones support this sense of autonomy. And in the second example, I highlight the all-important interjection within an onboarding experience that reassures the user they will be able to make changes later. Now, how can we use what we know about autonomy to identify opportunities to better fulfill our basic or users' basic psychological needs, knowing that by doing so we will foster sustained engagement, motivation, and well-being. We can start asking ourselves some of these questions. This is not an exhaustive list, and they may not all apply to your context, but they cover some common opportunities for autonomy support. Before moving on, I want to point to some common misconceptions to do with autonomy. As you can see, supporting basic needs isn't the kind of thing you can do as a plug-and-play exercise. You have to think a bit more deeply about it. Think deep before you leap. Our lab has been developing theoretical models to better understand how technologies can support well-being. How, for example, a healthy technology can be more engaging by allowing users to easily personalize the interface, by feeling autonomous and setting their own goals, by providing means to build meaningful relationships with others. And we have also built the empirical evidence of what works and what doesn't. For example, our headgear app was developed to help employees in male-dominated workplaces reduce or be less likely to feel anxious or fall into depression. Through a large randomized controlled trial, we were able to show its efficacy in preventing depression and anxiety. This has the obvious benefit, of course, to employees, but also to employers, because mental health is one of the biggest causes of illness and absenteeism. So this benefits all the stakeholders in these systems. So what is my message to the entrepreneurs and engineers out there, to my students? What do I tell them about the future and what they can do? Well, technology that aligns with social values and that acknowledges the impact it has on society will take us to places we as a society want to go. If you're an engineer, a designer, or an entrepreneur, you should take the lead. Show your employees and your customers how you're ahead of the game, how you're willing to hear and adapt to these new ethics that puts them and society above all else. Thank you.